We're going to do a pared down version of it without the generator, because I think that adds a lot of layers to it accidentally. So let's just keep that in a tiny environment and see what happens.
Abuse is an arms race. It is a two-edged sword of Damocles, wrapped parabologistically around an anti-triple entendre deployed during a Mexican standoff in the hall of mirrors of a domestic abuse shelter. This is what men want. To live as men have lived for ages past and into perpetuity. Even to kill a woman is a privilege reserved for a particular, gendered and age-affixed class. A good old boy has spent too long thinking that life as a white alpha male was just fine, so now the self-involved fantasy of beating down and cutting down others, either sexual or social inferiors, is always an option. Not just to avoid humiliation, but because that is what he always does. There is always a chain of people to follow behind to punish their foibles or simply to embody the suspension of reality they can no longer consider personal. We live in the light, but there are monsters beneath our feet, and this is true even for good men, who may go quietly mad or far more dramatically by the realization of what they have become. The quietest men are the most dangerous and most malevolent. Those who walk into bars in their own version of civilized hell, housed within a recently privatized fortress of sadistic public incarceration called a correctional institution, where no one stops them. This is why they want women, both in the domestic, social, or economic sense, to die. The celebrity rapist Juan Obiso was prosecuted by an all-white jury as an unfortunate product of being poor. It was as if he had contracted cancer, suffered a traffic accident, or grown up with no mother. The fallout is assumed and inevitable, inexorable as death. As far as white supremacy goes, nothing justifies killing someone because she has come into one's home. The suggestion that men as men will also seek to be women, something even women themselves do from time to time, has now been established once and for all. It has always been a disquieting prospect, but also a key factor of domestical relations and gender identity. I've always known what a man wants, although I couldn't put it into words. But the importuning of a babysitter on behalf of one's partner suggests something altogether different. I wish I were dead and no one can protect me. I still say nothing because it is hard to translate any of this. How, after all, can I fit all of this into a frame for my experiences and be there as I explain what the story really means? How can I even speak it without wanting to hold up a sign that says, "Help, I am drowning in your midst"? And because this is true, how could any man not want to hold her head under, thinking, this is a way for it to end? She's so white. What's the fucking matter with these women? They think that I don't exist and no one ever did. The strangulation that was just like falling, because death comes when a hand holds your head down against a concrete floor, so that they can float through the streets. That was when the hand finally let go. It has come down to me at the age of almost 50 having to begin to make it mean something, because it means so much to so many, and not just to my particular understanding, not just to me or to this family. For too long I've tried to understand why I wasn't strong enough to just come out and say I hated all the violence that happened in front of me, particularly after 2001 and 2006, when things took such a frightening turn. But why did I take it without comment, always internalizing the blame until the thing finally broke loose in the face of new circumstances that allowed it to manifest itself in my children by accident, like some toxic demon given my refusal to admit its reality. Now this has to stop. So here's a sign if I need to make one right. Why bother doing this? all that really matters is a family in which my wife, my son, daughter, and I lived. Who am I kidding? Nothing else ever mattered. Not the one, nor the other, or any third party derangement of this peculiar piece of the world we call a house, with or without love. No, I wanted the crime and punishment for too long. I had to share some responsibility, and I was ashamed. Maybe I should call them right now, just to start it over. No matter where it went or where the record stood after 2 decades, it's enough. If I look out my window from this park and at that particular avenue, I can see where their house was on my old street, and if I did not kill it dead before it made that first circuit across our small park, it happened the moment I couldn't save them any longer from their father or me. I call myself their father, without rendering them truly adult or living away from home for real. This is my family now, both here with me and within my imagination, dead without them having really ever died. They just always die anyway, although they may want to be dead most of their lives, although sometimes the heart actually wants to be stopped and no one's hands are big enough to actually do that or be taken. You should hear these lectures. All this before or during what could only be considered an alien attack on an uncooperative alien land on our ancestral soils. As far as it goes, even I agree that this was something a family needs to face up to and renegotiate together. So now we can put this record back in the can and shut it up with an iron lid or destroy it entirely. But the last word belongs to me, as this is all my story. This is me. You can come down and collect whatever remains with me as a person, which means with and about you. I haven't thrown it away either, because there will always be another day. My time to look into my eyes' depths, seeing some part of their father is lost. So why can't I really find anything about myself to want?
Let's try another side of that.
Yet despite the false logics and faulty statistics, even though these facts were constantly overlooked or incorrectly cited by social media outrage campaigns, one thing was always true, and it was the final piece of evidence I needed. That all 3 women, Jilly Cooper, Letitia Guyon Harroch, and Louisa May Alcott, who went on trial for assaulting their abusive spouses, did so against the law. At least one of these 3 women could have pressed charges, but they did not, for reasons known only to them. This meant that those charges might still be enforced. Now I wanted to know what the real issue was behind this fight that so many of the people on Twitter found so impossible to comprehend. Why were 3 otherwise smart and responsible women, including a political scientist, a musician, and a female police chief, apparently happy to condemn each other to the status of aggressor in a war game designed and marketed as seriously unfair? Why were these otherwise bright, sane, educated women apparently unable to consider what it means when 2 wrongs don't make a right, especially when their very safety is at stake? Why were they unable to empathize with a fellow woman who, for unknown reasons, didn't have a safety net beneath her as she was pulled down into a hopelessly one-sided engagement with no hope of exit? And moreover, how is it that one could fight against oneself and win using one's intelligence, political status, or natural authority in the most classic examples of logic sinking evidence, data, common sense, and yet one could also fight against oneself with inside information? That just proved how ludicrous it is to doubt one's own divinity or virility yet be winning by the terms of this debate. I understood enough of the online echo chamber and its heuristics and biases to recognize the implicit explanation as soon as it popped up on a new site when the dismissal was instead being directed at others. It meant it wasn't an acceptable sin, yet this time it seemed I would have to appeal to something beyond mere virtue and whatever might have passed for internal orthodoxy as regards to feminism or Hashmetude. I recognized that there was one further assumption about violence that still needed to be faced. The only place these people could confront someone from their tribe, much as one would approach an unpleasant school friend, like Helen Gittner, was not inside one's mind, not via their own deliberations, but in the battlefield of online engagement, the public square, where a liberal social climate meant one was well protected by all those witnesses who also happened to be judges and policemen and public officials and mothers, and I hope but with misgiving that none of the things I needed to talk about could easily be exposed and spoiled in that harsh and bright light of social media. After all, for me there had already been another great abyss to be crossed, and I wasn't alone. An international fraternity of others who had found themselves in such places, who were made to doubt the most important of assumptions of the truth's survival in the realm of the occult and its association with the store of forms we might use to examine, acknowledge, or apologize for anything human, no matter how holy it may seem, whether as a sacramental or as the house of a temple. In this darkness we needed one another's testimony, not that of any noble phantasm. As we all know, you don't find absolution, only ever encounter, so all that was left for us was to rely upon the concrete acts of confession and redemption enacted upon those truths we proved beyond doubt by our own deeds, our own free will and fear. In any case, I figured the public might have been feeling this pressure since the summer, when a scandal that looked like a Spanish farce began to bleed into a national dialogue and spread worldwide. The long and short of the story of Ibiza was that three well-connected Spanish people began an international tempest, one that came back around in some surprising places, not because it had anything to do with our current post-Gnostic crisis, but simply because these three were facing contemporary cultural taboos. Each was involved with another young person, an artist or a DJ. They'd been enjoying their Friday night fling under the unicorn flirting watch of an infallible witness, their god of the moment. In short, their Saturday had begun in ecstasy, since these people are from Ibiza or perhaps wherever it was they liked to fuck. These three, as they became 4, and then 6 and 7 and more, ended up as usual in such cases outside. One was getting very drunk, which meant jumping all around. There was no question that one of them was someone very like her, for people didn't turn out and gasp to watch a difference. Merely an identitas had done as several times that week, that night, or in some more extreme versions of herself. After all, one would always turn up drunk, since drinking was as essential a function of human beings as breathing. At some point in her Friday flirtation, her behavior, I imagined she had become sexually harassed, led astray, if you like, and possibly even her increasingly entropic form, even if she never called him anything worse than a little shit, was declared inappropriate by a human with some power over the group. Then all this lovely fireball that we were attempting to master turned up out of the dark waves, crashing and rearing on rocks, and apologized fangs showing to avoid their own pearl and ecstasy, only to find herself huddled somewhere and squeezed for this perceived mistake by someone, whether it was in an Ibiza brothel, or the guy whose friend just took it all down from a 16-pound rock on the top of an open source partly very popular these days. And it was the moment of the splitter spilled also to rhyme with spit, like blood from a nose. Each one went looking for her original identity, but they found versions of themselves, Even others were warring within these particular others, since whatever it was these three people found themselves into, they had spent a week arguing and killing the parts of their mind that came after and questioned this struggle. Perhaps they were dancing or being married in the sexual matrix and environment that could provide an extremely believable form of life. I've tried it out in several times, but only by suppressing those who tell a better tale, the poet and the erotic scholar, and all the parts of a body that serve a function other than pure, mad fucking. These spouts and the shocks of a sexual democracy never approved of this act of bodily baptism. But one or the other, it is not known who took whose side, just wanted to pick and choose one's version of truth, one's conception of beauty and danger, one's emotional experience, one's bodily autonomy. One could have opted out someone wanted to hold her in check or soothe her and force the decision about their moral discourse, and not all these lovely flames were fun and in good company. It is unlikely that the majority voted. In any case, at one moment all of their deepest assumptions of tolerance and shared worth had collapsed. And for 2 days all around the globe, these people began to disengage from one another, both through individual and on occasion corporate reactions to these strange news events, and from the rearguard defense of old positions, those of the strong women, those of the club kids. They felt their vision of a sort of dilemma, but of what might happen once you get out of bed and explore some version of this chaotic human potential collapse into dust. Their psyche, and especially those parts that had made them human at all, especially the parts of itself that had once wanted to live outside these simplicities. That would be when a revolution against oneself begins, and yet all that happened apart from this public penance for having overstepped their taboos was the matter of how those people handled the sad news. Where are the things they gave their word about, some sort of aesthetic equality and justice? One didn't turn up with a dog whistle and threaten a scary siren from an African prince. Instead, they entered into a book full of hairless monkeys, sometimes faking being an angel who do everything exactly as they were told to. Thus, I assume, seeing this, that we still want to protect ourselves against the heart's terror and confusion. It feels so cruel and wrong. These are the reasons I told my ex to lose his address. This is where people search for another face. A bit like how humans keep talking about sex with no one and anyone, how they could watch everyone come but no one be present for them, or how they are for everybody except for the one. Yet most of us haven't mastered this contradiction. Might there not be a special hand in heaven waiting to feed this cry of dissatisfaction, always shorn and without any source of contact or provision for love, like one who begs without being loved? But why don't we wait for the first sign instead of fighting with these problems? These are not people you can argue with. Then again, arguing with us, those who keep giving your faces to ourselves, might also be your way to never trust in gods, just as no one else has this perfect dialogue with someone they think is made of lies. That would be where your true enemies would all emerge. Those who imagine them as essential and tragic parts of reality, as it happens another ironic disappointment if I understand your faces and those parts of it which lie beneath all other sides. But this was what was finally unraveling at Ibiza as their perspectives dissolved and inverted and dissolved again. What was real in those three souls came crashing down. All that is left is your illusions, and even now there might be something up your sleeve too, if it makes you happy, along with this handful of soot from your dreams. And that was their folly. Which of these really belongs to the devil? When faced with any impossibility, even as we jump and swim, we're dressed in various white sheets. At our first meeting, we will always grab the hand, for all is faithfulness. Just like our childish flirtation with love in Ibiza, a beautiful experience in so many ways, yet as painful as an unwarranted quickie after hours with a boy at some bar. If we just weren't married already, and are carrying someone else's baby, perhaps our friend's child, they always remain alive. within us if we were single or needed a perfect sex life and perfect children to tell ourselves we weren't gay.